Imagine an empire that conquered lands, crushed armies, and imposed its will on the ancient world. But what if I told you that Rome's dominance wasn't just on land? For centuries, the Roman navy was a feared force, expanding the empire and securing its supremacy over the seas. So what went wrong? How did such a powerful force, one that destroyed enemy fleets and built an empire upon the waters, lose control of the seas? Get ready for an epic journey through naval battles, brilliant strategies, and the fatal mistakes that led to the decline of Rome's mighty fleet. Stay until the end to discover how this loss forever changed the fate of Rome. In the beginning, Rome was a city surrounded by mountains, born from war and the need to protect its territory against neighboring tribes. The Roman legions, made up of disciplined and relentless soldiers, dominated the land battlefield, conquering lands and expanding Rome's influence throughout the Italian peninsula. The Romans, with their skill in military strategies and organization, became invincible on land. But as their borders expanded, a significant limitation became increasingly apparent: the sea. As Rome established itself as a military and territorial power, the Mediterranean, which bordered Rome and its neighbors, was controlled by maritime powers like Carthage and Greece. Carthage, with its powerful Phoenician fleet, controlled key trade ports and dominated maritime routes, while Greece, with its prosperous city-states, had great influence on the islands and trade in the eastern Mediterranean. Rome, despite its unbeatable strength on land, was vulnerable at sea. Vital trade between Roman cities and their new provinces could be interrupted by pirate attacks or by the increasingly dominant Carthaginian fleet. It was only a matter of time before Rome found itself in a delicate position. If it truly wanted to consolidate its empire and ensure its growth, control over the Mediterranean would become inevitable. But how could a city with little naval experience face powers with imposing fleets, like Carthage, who had already dominated the seas for decades? With its pragmatic nature, Rome solved the problem the way it always knew how, with ingenuity and determination. In secret, the Romans began building their own ships, facing a monumental task. Their first naval forays were improvised, made with limited resources and inexperienced sailors. Rome, however, was not one to give up in the face of adversity. Quickly, its engineers adapted to the challenge, studying their enemies' ships closely and improving them with a touch of innovation. The Roman navy began to incorporate the best of both powers, allowing the city to take the war to the seas, something that had seemed impossible until then. However, Rome didn't limit itself to copying what already existed. With every attempt, it improved its ships, making them faster, stronger, and above all, more adaptable to the strategy that would prove to be the Roman difference: land warfare. While other empires fought at sea with traditional naval tactics, Rome was preparing to bring the fight to the enemy ships in an entirely new way, using its experience in land battles. The crucial step had been taken. The sea, which had been an unexplored and intimidating territory for Rome, was beginning to become a natural extension of the city's military strength. Dominating trade routes and protecting against any threats from the sea became one of the pillars of Roman policy. What had once been a distant territory was now becoming part of the great empire, a powerful tool for conquest and integration of new provinces. The Roman fleet was being shaped to become not only a defender of Roman shores, but also a symbol of Rome's unshakable determination to conquer and hold on to what it had acquired, an empire that would now also be naval. With its navy on the rise, Rome soon found itself facing a massive challenge. Carthage, with its elite fleet and merchant empire, dominated the western Mediterranean. The Phoenician city, located on the northern coast of Africa, had a superior war fleet, made up of fast and well-trained ships. For Carthage, the sea wasn't just an extension of territory, but the very heart of its power. Its trade routes spanned the entire Mediterranean, and the wealth generated by this network of exchanges was the foundation of its prosperity. Carthage's strength was rooted in its ability to control the seas and ensure its trade, giving it a unique strategic advantage. Rome, on the other hand, was beginning to realize that despite its great military strength on land, it would need to face Carthage to ensure its growth and dominance. But how could a city still adapting to naval warfare challenge such a well-established power at sea? The tension between the two nations was growing. Rome, with its immense ambition, could not afford to fall behind while Carthage controlled vital trade routes. The confrontation was inevitable. The spark for the conflict came with the dispute over Sicily, a strategic island in the center of the Mediterranean. Carthage and Rome were already competing for influence in the region, and the growing rivalry led to open war. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC, was declared, and both sides prepared for what would be a titanic confrontation, not only on land but primarily at sea. For Rome, still crawling in naval warfare, this was a colossal risk. However, as always, the Romans were willing to overcome any obstacle. The war began with naval skirmishes, small battles, and clashes that revealed the vast differences between the two powers. The Carthaginians, with their experienced ships, dominated the waters at first, leaving Rome in an uncomfortable position. However, the Romans were not willing to surrender. As always, when confronted with adversity, Rome turned the situation in its favor with a combination of ingenuity and determination. It was at this time that Rome began to use its main strength, quick adaptation. The military system that had made Rome so powerful on land would now be used to face an enemy at sea. The Romans began building a fleet at record speed, quickly transforming into a formidable adversary for Carthage. Throughout the war, Rome not only learned to fight at sea but improved its fleet and sailors, becoming a naval power in a matter of years. The war, which had started with a great imbalance, was now at a turning point. Rome's victory in the First Punic War seemed impossible at first, but as the war progressed, it became clear that Rome was beginning to understand how to fight at sea and, most importantly, how to win. Dominating the waters was no longer an impossible task, but a goal within reach for its soldiers and engineers. Rome was about to forever change the balance of power in the Mediterranean. As the war intensified, Rome realized that, to defeat Carthage at sea, it would need more than just ships and sailors. The real key to defeating the powerful Carthaginian fleet was adapting the combat style Rome was already accustomed to on land: hand-to-hand fighting, with the discipline of the Roman legions and tactical mastery over its soldiers. It was an approach none of Rome's enemies had anticipated. The problem was clear: the Carthaginian ships were faster, lighter, and much more agile. They were perfect for high-speed battles and quick maneuvers, which gave them a huge advantage at sea. Rome, with its still developing fleet, needed an advantage that would balance this disadvantage. Roman ingenuity, always so efficient, appeared in the form of an invention that would change the course of naval warfare. This is how the corvus emerged, a clever device that would transform Roman ships into battle platforms, adapting the seas to the land-based style of warfare that Rome mastered. The corvus was a movable bridge, with sharp metal hooks at the end, designed to be thrown over enemy ships. When the corvus hit an enemy ship, it would latch on tightly, allowing Roman soldiers to cross the bridge and invade the enemy ship as if they were on a battlefield. The superiority in hand-to-hand combat of the Roman legions thus became the decisive factor in naval battles. But as with everything the Romans invented, the corvus came with its own challenges. The device, effective in combat, added weight to the Roman ships, making them more unstable in rough seas. In calm waters, the corvus was an unbeatable weapon, but in storms and strong winds, the Romans had to navigate skillfully to avoid shipwrecks. However, Roman ingenuity was not limited to a single invention. It was a philosophy, an approach that turned every difficulty into an opportunity. By implementing the crow, Rome began to turn the tides of war. The Carthaginian naval superiority, which had seemed unbeatable at first, started to give way to the immense combat power of the Roman legions, now projected onto the sea. The corvus was not just a weapon of war. It was a symbol of Rome's ability to turn any challenge into a victory. The sea was no longer an intimidating territory, but a battlefield where the Roman legions could expand their influence, and the very destiny of Rome in the Mediterranean was about to be rewritten. The Battle of Myla, fought in 260 BCE, would become a milestone in Roman history, a victory that surprised even the most skeptical. The First Punic War had begun with Rome at a disadvantage at sea, facing an experienced and well-equipped Carthaginian fleet. However, the innovation of the corvus transformed the waters of the Mediterranean into a terrain where the Romans could finally apply their famous discipline and military strength. As the Battle of Myla approached, the atmosphere was tense. The Carthaginians, confident in their naval supremacy, approached with their fast and well-trained ships, ready to annihilate the Romans in a confrontation that seemed to be a mere formality for the North African power. But the Romans, with their newly assembled fleet and ships equipped with corvuses, had other plans. When the two sides met in open waters, the battle exploded into a whirlwind of shouts, steel, and waves crashing against the hulls of the vessels. The Carthaginians, accustomed to quick battles and tactics, soon realized that war at sea would not be like anything they had faced before. When the Roman ships approached, the corvuses were launched with precision, and in a strategic move, Roman soldiers crossed the moving bridge, boarding the enemy vessels. It was the land game now played at sea, and the Roman legions, with their superior training in direct combat, quickly took control of the Carthaginian ships. The battlefield turned into a hand-to-hand combat field, where Rome, with its disciplined and cohesive force, began to overcome the more flexible and faster tactics of the Carthaginians. When the smoke from the battle began to clear, the Roman victory was assured. Although Rome's fleet was still relatively small and inexperienced, it had found a way to turn the tides of war in its favor. But Rome's path to victory was not easy. Throughout the war, Rome suffered several significant losses, both from unforeseen storms and from lack of experience at sea. Fleets were destroyed by stormy tides, and many Roman sailors died during shipwrecks. However, Roman resilience was undeniable. Each defeat was followed by an even faster and more efficient rebuilding of the fleet. The Romans, relentless, returned to the sea once again, determined to achieve victory, not only in individual battles, but in the war as a whole. Finally, in 241 BCE, Rome achieved its great victory at the Battle of the Egadian Islands. The Carthaginian fleet, weakened by heavy losses and scarce resources, could not withstand the power of Rome. Carthage, faced with defeat, was forced to sign a peace treaty. As a result, Rome conquered Sicily, its first province outside the Italian peninsula, marking the end of the First Punic War. The victory was not just a military one, but a reflection of the Roman spirit. The ability to reinvent itself, adapt, and above all, never give up. With Sicily under its control, Rome was now an emerging naval power, ready to expand its ambitions and influence across the Mediterranean. The Roman triumph in the war against Carthage would become a turning point in history, launching Rome into the race to become the leading power of the ancient world, not only on land but also at sea. After the victory in the First Punic War, Rome found itself in an unexpected position. As an emerging naval power, with the Mediterranean now its battlefield, but with a fleet that still needed to be refined to consolidate its supremacy. The war against Carthage had been won, but that did not mean that Roman dominance at sea was assured. On the contrary, the victory opened Rome's eyes to the urgent need to modernize and refine its fleet, so it could sustain control over vast trade routes and protect its new conquests. The first crucial decision was to gradually abandon the corvus. Although this invention had been vital during the First Punic War, Rome now recognized that speed and agility were essential for a truly effective fleet. Roman ships were redesigned to be faster, with thinner hulls and adapted for quick, precise maneuvers. The Rome that once fought relentlessly on land now needed to ensure that its navy could carry out swift and efficient attacks at sea. This improvement was not just about shipbuilding. It also involved a shift in strategy and training. Rome began to invest heavily in the training of sailors, ensuring that its fleet was made up of well-trained crews adapted to the new demands of naval battles. It was an evolution of the Roman mindset, which had always prioritized discipline and continuous practice, now applied to the sea. Additionally, Rome expanded its operations to ensure control over strategic islands around the Mediterranean. Sardinia and Corsica were the first to fall under Roman control, not only due to their strategic importance, but also for the need to protect vital trade routes. By dominating these islands, Rome not only strengthened its defenses, but also increased its presence in key locations for the movement of goods and troops. Rome was not just reforming its fleet, it was designing a naval force that would become the pillar of its security and power throughout the Mediterranean world. With a highly skilled army of sailors and agile ships that could perform maneuvers with precision, the Roman fleet was now capable of competing directly with any other naval power of the time. However, the true strength of the Roman navy lay in its adaptability. Whenever new challenges arose, Rome did not hesitate to seek innovative solutions. Thus, with a more efficient fleet design and rigorous training, Rome solidified its position as a power at sea, expanding its borders and, more importantly, securing the future of its empire. The Mediterranean Sea, which once seemed like a distant threat, was now its domain, and Rome was ready to extend its reach even further, relentlessly. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BCE, emerged as an extreme test for Rome, where its past victories became mere echoes of a glorious past in the face of the monstrous threat approaching. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian military genius. He not only invaded Italy but crossed the Alps with his army, a feat that seemed impossible to many. At the same time, the Romans, who had already experienced the harsh reality of prolonged war, were at a disadvantage on the land battlefield. Rome, which had once dominated the sea, now faced a struggle that would require more than just its legions and fleets. As Hannibal advanced through the Italian peninsula, inflicting crushing defeats in battles like Cannae, the Roman navy became one of the most crucial pieces for Rome's survival. Although the Romans were being defeated on land, their fleet, now strong and agile, played a crucial role in blocking any attempt by Carthage to send reinforcements to support Hannibal. Rome's naval supremacy was being tested like never before. Carthage, to support its campaign, needed to ensure that its resources reached its armies in Italy, but Rome made sure that this was impossible. In a strategic move, the Roman fleet managed to interrupt the flow of reinforcements and supplies coming from Carthage, which had previously been vital to Hannibal's campaign. Thanks to its unbeatable naval presence, Rome blocked the main shipping routes and further weakened the Carthaginian support base. Even with the Romans in trouble on land, naval strength proved vital in keeping Carthage in check. Each victory at sea meant that Hannibal became more isolated and lacked sufficient resources to feed his army, a strategy that, though difficult, began to weigh on the Carthaginian forces. However, the Romans were not limited to simply preventing reinforcements. They also began to expand their offensive on other fronts, using their navy to attack Carthaginian colonies in Hispania, cutting off yet another vital resource line for Carthage. Throughout this war, the Roman fleet proved incredibly adaptable, using siege tactics and ambushes at sea to face the naval power of Carthage, a skill that became more and more refined. As Rome began to gain ground in Hispania, weakening Carthaginian presence, the Roman navy not only maintained control over the Mediterranean, but also became a crucial facilitator for the upcoming land invasion. Rome's naval supremacy was essential to preventing the Carthaginians from gaining support from other allies and resources to confront the Roman offensive. As battles started turning in Rome's favor, the fleet not only blockaded Carthage, but also became a symbol of Roman might, proving that Rome had not only learned how to fight at sea, but had now mastered it. The balance of power in the Mediterranean began to decisively tilt in favor of Rome, while Carthage, isolated and weakened, saw its naval supremacy disintegrate. With victories at sea, Rome also paved the way for what would be the final defeat of Carthage. After years of clashes, schemes, and strategies, the Second Punic War culminated in a decisive event, the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. Under the command of Roman general Scipio Africanus, Rome was about to end the Carthaginian threat once and for all. Hannibal, the great Carthaginian strategist who had inflicted so many defeats on the Romans in their own lands, now faced a prepared Roman army, with refined tactics and an unbeatable navy to support any military movement. By the time Rome was fighting this crucial battle, its navy had already been consolidated as the dominant force in the Mediterranean. During the war, Rome had learned the importance of its naval power, not just for fighting, but also for projecting power over the entire Mediterranean. The Roman fleet was crucial in transporting troops, supplying provisions, and ensuring the blockade of Carthage on its major sea routes, isolating the Carthaginians from any external help. The victory at Zama was not just a military victory. It was also the turning point that solidified Roman dominance over the seas. The Roman navy was vital for Scipio to transport his troops to North Africa, where the decisive battle was fought. Without naval supremacy, this movement would have been virtually impossible. Rome now not only dominated the land, but also the waters, making its power nearly unbeatable. With the defeat of Hannibal and the fall of Carthage, Rome was in a unique position to expand its dominion and solidify its authority over the Mediterranean. Rome's naval power was indisputable. Carthage, in turn, was forced to dismantle its fleet and pay heavy reparations, leaving Rome with the freedom to expand its borders without the threat of a significant naval rival. Rome didn't just overcome Carthage. Its victory set a new standard for power in the Mediterranean. The Roman navy became the central pillar of its grand expansion, essential not only for the defense of the empire, but also for ensuring that trade and communication flowed unobstructed, connecting the various parts of the empire. The Roman navy was now the guardian of the trade routes that sustained the vast network of cities and provinces of the empire. With the victory at Zama and the defeat of Carthage, Rome took the final steps to become the definitive naval power, with unquestionable control of the Mediterranean Sea. The war had ended, but the Roman navy now possessed a force that would endure for centuries, becoming a key element in Rome's rise as a world power. The security of the waters, the protection of trade routes, and the projection of power became the trademarks of the Roman Empire, leaving an indelible mark on the history of navigation and naval warfare. With the decisive victory over Carthage and the consolidation of power in the west, Rome turned its attention to the east, where new threats were emerging on the horizon. The Eastern Mediterranean, a region marked by powers like the Seleucid Empire and Macedonia, became the new stage for disputes over supremacy. Rome, now with a solid naval power and a network of allies, was ready to face these challenges. The Seleucid Empire, with its vast territory stretching from Asia Minor to the heart of Mesopotamia and Macedonia, with its veteran armies, posed a direct threat to Roman security and its control over the Mediterranean. Rome, therefore, realized it couldn't simply expand without confronting these powers that were pushing in strategic directions toward the Roman Empire. The Roman navy, as always, would be key to this new phase of expansion. Naval campaigns began to gain strength, with Rome intensifying its incursions into the Aegean Sea, the Sea of Asia Minor, and even the waters off the coast of Asia Minor and Egypt. Every strategic move at sea was crucial to weakening the Eastern powers and ensuring that Rome maintained an unbeatable presence. At the same time, Rome used its naval strength to protect its new provinces and reinforce its position on the strategic islands of the Eastern Mediterranean. While Roman forces advanced on land, the Roman navy ensured the safe transport of troops and supplies. In naval battles, the Romans applied refined tactics and bold strategies, while their warships became increasingly agile, powerful, and fast. Roman dominance of the seas ensured that the Seleucids and Macedonians could not launch surprise attacks or cut off supply lines to Roman armies. Rome was no longer just defending its territory, it was conquering new lands. Naval campaigns against the Hellenistic kingdoms paved the way for the annexation of Greece, Asia Minor, and even Egypt, a vital region rich in resources. Rome's ability to conduct efficient warfare both on land and at sea was one of the key factors that allowed this advancement. The Roman navy once again proved to be the beating heart of imperial expansion. Not only was Rome gaining new lands, but it was also establishing its authority over vital trade routes and expanding its influence throughout the Mediterranean world. The Mediterranean, which had once been dominated by various powers, was now, without a doubt, under Roman control. With the fall of the Seleucid Empire and the absorption of the last Macedonian forces, Rome had established itself as the only superpower in the Mediterranean. The Roman navy, which had started as a defensive and limited conquest force, was now an indomitable presence, projecting power throughout the East and solidifying Rome as the dominant maritime power in the Mediterranean. After centuries of conquests, wars, and victories, Rome finally entered a period of stability, known as the Pax Romana, which lasted from 27 BC to 180 AD. This was a period of relative peace and prosperity within the empire, but contrary to what one might expect, peace did not mean inactivity for the Roman military. On the contrary, the empire, now larger and more powerful than ever, needed to ensure that its trade routes and strategic ports remained secure to guarantee the continuity of trade and economic stability. The Roman navy played a central role in this scenario. Control of the waters became essential not only to maintain internal security, but also to project Roman power over other powers and ensure that the trade routes connecting the empire to distant lands, such as India, North Africa, and the Levant, were protected. These routes were vital for the flow of wealth sustaining the empire, such as grain from Egypt, spices from India, and luxury goods from the East. While Rome enjoyed the Pax Romana, its empire was united by an extensive network of roads and, more importantly, by a vast naval domain that patrolled and ensured the security of the main trade routes. The Roman navy not only protected against external invasions, but also fought pirates, who, though a constant threat since the early history of Rome, were far from defeated. With its naval power, Rome was able to suppress piracy, which had flourished in the seas, especially in the Mediterranean. The Cilician pirates, who had once taken advantage of the lack of control over the waters, were gradually eliminated by the Roman navy. The Roman presence in the empire's waters, with its constant patrols, became a symbol of the stability the empire represented. Merchants could sail more safely, ships could move from port to port without fear of attacks, and wealth flowed constantly. Moreover, controlling the trade routes wasn't just about protection. Rome used its naval power to ensure its position as the dominant force in the Mediterranean and beyond. For example, trade routes between Rome and the East, like the Silk Road, were under constant surveillance to prevent any other power, such as the Parthians or the Germanic peoples, from interfering with the vital commerce for Rome's economy. The empire thus became an economic hub not only because of its ability to exploit its own resources, but also due to its ability to control trade routes connecting various parts of the known world. During the Pax Romana, the Roman navy not only ensured peace, but also supported the wealth and stability that allowed the empire to flourish. It was an invisible yet absolutely crucial presence that ensured Rome's vast empire remained united, prosperous, and secure. Rome's dominance over the seas was the foundation that upheld the peace governing the empire, allowing Rome to continue shining as a global power. The Roman navy wasn't just protecting borders. It was creating an interconnected network of ports, trade routes, and cities, all connected by the security and efficiency of a powerful fleet. In times of peace, the Roman navy became an invisible but omnipresent force, ensuring that Rome stayed at the center of the ancient world. Although the Pax Romana brought an era of peace and prosperity to the Roman Empire, it also brought with it a series of unexpected challenges. One such challenge was the resurgence of piracy in the Mediterranean. In the 1st century BC, political stability within Rome began to decline, and the focus that had once been directed at defending and expanding the empire was shifted to increasing internal tensions, resulting in a decrease in investment in the Roman navy. This weakening of Roman naval power allowed a phenomenon that, though already known, was about to become a growing threat: piracy. The Cilician pirates, from the mountainous region of Cilicia, now part of Turkey, took advantage of the lack of naval oversight to expand their operations, attacking merchant ships and kidnapping Roman citizens. Their attacks were not just simple robberies. The Cilician pirates captured large quantities of valuable goods and, more insidiously, took prisoners to demand substantial ransoms. Rome, once unbeatable at sea, found itself vulnerable to these attacks, which threatened the trade crucial to its economy and the security of its supply routes. With the rise of piracy, Roman trade began to suffer. Merchant ships, which had once sailed in safe waters, were now being attacked. Ports, once thriving, began to see a decline in the flow of goods. Most concerning for Rome was the fact that these pirate raids were often carried out with total impunity. The empire, which had dominated the Mediterranean waters, was now at the mercy of small bands of pirates. Pirate activities were not just an inconvenience for merchants, but also a direct threat to the security of the empire itself. The lack of control over trade routes could cause shortages of vital resources, such as grain and other essentials for maintaining peace and order within Rome. With piracy becoming a real and growing threat, it was only a matter of time before the empire took drastic measures to restore security in the Mediterranean waters. In 67 BC, Rome was forced to take decisive action against the Cilician pirates. The empire needed a large-scale military intervention to ensure that its naval supremacy was restored and its trade routes were once again protected. Piracy, a threat that had challenged the empire for so long, was about to be eradicated from the face of the Mediterranean. In 67 BC, faced with the growing threat of the Cilician pirates infesting the Mediterranean waters, Rome made a drastic decision. The situation had become unsustainable. The pirates were no longer just scattered bandits, but an organized and strategic force that was beginning to disrupt not only trade, but the very security of the empire. To combat this rising threat, the Roman Senate entrusted Pompey the Great, one of Rome's greatest generals, with an unprecedented mission: to rid the Mediterranean of piracy. Pompey was granted extraordinary powers, known as imperium maius, meaning he had total authority to act without consulting the Senate or magistrates. He was appointed to command a large fleet and given control over the entire Mediterranean Sea, allowing him to act swiftly and decisively. This unlimited authority reflected the gravity of the situation and the trust Rome placed in Pompey to resolve a problem that threatened the stability of the entire region. Pompey acted quickly and efficiently. Within months, he organized a massive naval force composed of dozens of warships and thousands of soldiers. The task was monumental. He had to sweep the vast waters of the Mediterranean, destroy pirate bases, and restore the security of the trade routes. The enemy, however, was not easy to locate. The Cilician pirates were cunning, moving swiftly between islands and isolated ports, attacking and disappearing without leaving a trace. But Pompey, with his military skill, knew exactly how to deal with such opponents. He divided the Mediterranean into several operational zones and appointed experienced officers to lead each of these areas. With his well-coordinated fleet, Pompey established a network of constant patrols, blocking the pirates' escape routes and disrupting their operations. In a bold move, he also surrounded and attacked the pirates' strongholds in Cilicia, their homeland, forcing them to surrender or flee. At an impressive pace, Pompey and his fleet dismantled the pirate networks that had plagued the Mediterranean for so long. In just 3 months, Pompey had nearly eradicated Cilician piracy, restoring security to the empire's waters. Pompey's ability to coordinate a campaign of such magnitude was applauded in Rome, and his reputation as a great naval commander was further solidified. But Pompey's intervention against the pirates not only restored order to the Mediterranean, but also symbolized the power of Rome. The empire's ability to resolve an external threat of such magnitude showed the world Rome's military strength and its determination to maintain control over the sea. More importantly, Pompey's operation ensured that the empire's trade routes continued to operate uninterrupted, preserving Rome's prosperity and securing the continuous flow of wealth to the Eternal City. Pompey's intervention was not only a military victory, but also a political triumph. He had demonstrated his competence and further solidified his position within Roman politics. However, although this victory solved the immediate problem of piracy, Pompey's story and his rise to power were only just beginning, with his subsequent actions shaping the future of Rome in profound and lasting ways. The Roman Empire, which had long stood out for its stability and military power, entered a period of internal crisis that shook its foundations. The Roman civil wars, which spread throughout the end of the Republic, marked a period of unprecedented turmoil. The empire, once unified under a single government, found itself torn apart by internal conflicts, struggles for power, and deep political divisions. Roman generals, once defenders of public order, became the main protagonists in a fierce struggle for supremacy. At the center of this whirlwind were figures like Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Mark Antony, whose rivalries and personal ambitions led Rome into a series of civil conflicts. The Roman Navy, which had previously been a stable and vital force for the empire's security, found itself directly involved in these internal battles. Instead of protecting the borders and securing trade routes, the Roman fleet was used as a weapon in the power struggles between Rome's leading figures. During the war between Julius Caesar and Pompey, the Navy played a crucial role. Caesar, who initially lacked a considerable naval fleet, needed a maritime force to face Pompey, who had a vast naval power. The famous Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC was a decisive victory for Caesar on land, but the war wasn't confined to the battlefield. The fight for naval supremacy was just as important, and Caesar had to build a fleet in haste to ensure control of the sea. However, it was in the struggle between Mark Antony and Octavian that the Roman Navy played its most decisive role during the civil wars. After Julius Caesar's death, the empire was divided among his followers, with Mark Antony taking control of the east and Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, controlling the west. Their rivalry culminated in the famous Battle of Actium in 31 BC, where both naval forces clashed in an epic confrontation. Mark Antony, allied with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, commanded a powerful fleet, but Octavian's navy, led by the commander Agrippa, was better trained and more tactically efficient. The battle was a fatal blow to Mark Antony's ambitions, as, despite his brave efforts, his fleet was defeated and he was forced to retreat. Octavian's naval victory at Actium not only secured his dominance over the empire, but also ensured Rome's future under a new regime, now solidified with the title of Augustus. The civil wars had a profound impact on the Roman navy. Before this time, the Roman fleet was essentially a force of defense and power projection. However, during the internal conflicts, the navy was transformed into a decisive battlefield for the personal aspirations of the generals. Moreover, resources that had once been dedicated to maintaining the fleet were now used in a more fragmented way. With each military leader trying to ensure their own advantage at sea. The tensions of the civil wars also revealed the weaknesses of the Roman navy. The competition among generals for control of the fleets led to wasted resources, and the focus on internal politics diminished Rome's ability to maintain continuous naval dominance. When Octavian emerged victorious, the Roman Empire was ready to enter a new era, but the scars of the civil wars still affected Roman institutions, including the navy. After Octavian's victory and his rise to power as Augustus, the empire experienced a period of relative peace, known as the Pax Romana. During this time, the navy was reorganized and consolidated, but the lessons of the civil wars were not forgotten. Rome had learned the cost of internal instability, and the navy, now more focused on defense and trade, would be crucial in maintaining the empire's security, always with the memory of the internal conflicts that had almost destroyed it. The Mediterranean simmered with the tension of an empire in tatters. Rome, which had once risen as a great power, now found itself divided between two titans, Mark Antony and Octavian, whose destinies were intertwined not only in the political realm, but also on the vast sea that connected their forces. The civil wars, which had torn the empire apart, were finally approaching a definitive climax. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC would be the turning point that changed the course of Roman history. Mark Antony, allied with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, commanded a powerful fleet in the east, an army of veterans and formidable allies. His alliance with Cleopatra was not just a political union, but also a strategic force, as Egypt, with its resources, had become an essential ally for Antony's cause. The royal couple knew that to defeat Octavian and consolidate their power over Rome, they needed to control the sea, the empire's primary route of communication and transport. On the other side, Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, not only had an army of loyal followers, but also a formidable naval force, commanded by Agrippa, his experienced general. Octavian knew that his only chance to defeat his rival lay in a great naval battle. Therefore, he invested heavily in the Roman navy, equipping his fleet with fast and well-trained ships, creating a naval force capable of rivaling Antony's. The tension in the air was palpable. The fate of Rome depended on who would dominate the Mediterranean. The battle began in September 31 BC in the Gulf of Ambracia, near the city of Actium, and it quickly became clear that it would be an epic struggle. The fleets faced each other in a massive confrontation, with the sea becoming the stage for a desperate fight for absolute power. Mark Antony and Cleopatra, despite their superior forces, made crucial strategic errors. The biggest mistake was Cleopatra's decision to retreat from the battle, taking her fleet back to Egypt. This destabilized Antony's forces, and without his allies' support, he couldn't withstand the precise and relentless attack from Octavian's fleet. Octavian, under Agrippa's leadership, applied a careful and meticulous strategy, leveraging the speed and maneuverability of his fleet to encircle and defeat the enemies. Antony's ships, heavy and disorganized, were quickly defeated, and Mark Antony himself, seeing his defeat imminent, withdrew to Egypt, where he and Cleopatra committed suicide, thus ending the alliance that had once threatened Rome. Octavian's victory at Actium was not just a military victory, it was the victory of the future Roman Empire. By defeating his last great rival, Octavian consolidated his power over Rome and brought an end to the Roman Republic. In 27 BC, he assumed the title of Augustus, becoming the first emperor of Rome. Octavian's rise marked not only the end of the civil wars, but the beginning of a new chapter in the empire's history, marked by the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and prosperity that would last for more than 2 centuries. The Roman navy once again proved crucial to the empire's success. Octavian's victory at Actium solidified the fleet's role as a vital force not only for defense but also for power projection and maintaining control over the empire's vast maritime borders. From that moment on, Rome's dominance over the sea would be unquestionable, and the navy, now reorganized and strengthened, would play a central role in Rome's success and stability. The Battle of Actium, therefore, was not just the end of a great conflict, but the beginning of the age of Octavian, which would lead Rome to its greatest expansion and solidify its supremacy over the known world. The Roman navy, a formidable and unbeatable force, would be one of the pillars of this golden age, ensuring that Rome, as a naval power, kept its empire intact for centuries. After his decisive victory at the Battle of Actium, Octavian, now known as Augustus, took the reins of the empire and began a series of reforms that would transform Rome into an even more formidable power. One of the cornerstones of this reform was the reorganization of the Roman navy, which would become one of the greatest symbols of Rome's power and influence over the Mediterranean. The sea was no longer just a stage for battles, but an essential route to ensure the empire's prosperity and security. Augustus knew that, to ensure Roman dominance over the vast territory stretching from the west to the east, the navy needed to be modernized, efficient, and capable of maintaining control over the trade routes and maritime borders. To this end, he implemented a strategic division of the Roman fleet, creating two major classes, the Messenian class and the Ravenna class. Both classes were responsible for different regions of the empire, with the Messenian class focused on defending the western Mediterranean, and the Ravenna class overseeing control of the eastern Mediterranean. This division not only increased the navy's responsiveness, but also ensured that Rome could maintain a constant presence in all strategic regions. The Messenian fleet, based in the port of Misenum in the Bay of Naples, became the most powerful and prestigious fleet. It was responsible for patrolling the waters of the west, protecting the Italian coasts, from Hispania to Africa, and ensuring that Roman merchants could navigate safely without fearing pirate attacks or foreign enemies. This fleet was also crucial in maintaining the links between Rome and its western provinces, such as Gaul and the British Isles. Over time, the Messenian fleet would become a symbol of naval strength and superiority. The Ravenna fleet, on the other hand, was established to ensure control of the eastern Mediterranean, where the Roman Empire had vital interests. The Ravenna fleet was based in the city of Ravenna, which would become one of the greatest naval centers of the empire. Its primary mission was to protect Italy from threats coming from the east, as well as ensuring that trade between Rome and its eastern provinces, such as Greece, Asia Minor, and Egypt, was safe and uninterrupted. The Ravenna fleet played a decisive role in defending against attacks from the barbarian peoples of North Africa and later Germanic invaders. One of the major innovations during Augustus' reign was the increase in size and sophistication of the Roman navy. He invested in new warships, faster and more durable, capable of maneuvering more efficiently in battles and patrol operations. Furthermore, he reinforced the training of sailors, who were now highly trained soldiers prepared to face not only naval battles, but also the harsh conditions of the sea. The discipline and organization of the fleets under Augustus became a model for the navies of later empires. The Roman navy, now more powerful than ever, played a central role in the creation and maintenance of the Pax Romana, the period of relative peace that would last for over 2 centuries. During this time, the safety of trade routes and the protection of Roman provinces depended directly on the efficiency and presence of the navy. The empire thrived thanks to its control of the sea, and Rome truly became the leading naval power of the ancient world. In addition, the Roman navy under Augustus also had a symbolic role, representing Rome's absolute power. Naval victories were not only made to conquer lands, but also to assert Rome's supremacy over the seas. The empire, now united under Augustus' leadership, used its fleets to project its power outward, ensuring that any attempt to challenge Roman authority would be thwarted. The navy, therefore, was not just a military force. It was a tool of foreign policy, social control, and the maintenance of order within the vast empire. With the navy reorganized and strengthened, the Roman Empire continued with its great expansion, solidifying its hegemony over the Mediterranean and ensuring a future of prosperity. The Roman navy not only won battles, but also built a stronger, safer, and more prosperous Rome, with an uncontested presence on the seas. With the reorganization of the fleets under Augustus, Rome not only gained military naval supremacy, but also a logistical structure that would sustain this power for centuries. The Roman navy, now divided between the Messenian and Ravenna fleets, was not just a war fleet. It also functioned as a complex network of transportation and patrol that spanned the entire empire. To ensure the efficiency of its operations, the Romans had to develop a meticulous organization and a large-scale logistical system, which allowed the navy to perform various essential functions. Each of the 2 main naval fleets had a clear strategic mission, but the logistics between them were essential. The Messenian fleet, responsible for the defense of the West, was the largest and most powerful. Its base, located at the port of Misenum in southern Italy, became one of the largest naval centers in the Roman world. The city was equipped with shipyards and arsenals capable of building and repairing ships with impressive speed. The Ravenna fleet, focused on the eastern Mediterranean, operated from an equally strategic position, with the port of Ravenna serving as an essential support point for the Eastern Fleet. But the true strength of the Roman navy was not just in its imposing fleets, but in its logistical capacity to keep this force running. To supply the fleets with provisions, the Roman legions had an extremely well-developed supply network. In each port, there were storage centers for grains, water, and essential materials. The Roman navy was supplied by a network of transportation routes, which included cargo ships, peasants providing food, and artisans producing the necessary equipment for the fleet. The logistics of the fleet also involved a well-structured transport fleet, which ensured that the Roman legions, scattered across the empire, could be rapidly moved from one province to another. This not only ensured the security of maritime borders, but also provided the necessary mobility to sustain Roman expansion. Transport ships, known as navis honoraria, were used to carry soldiers, building materials, weapons, and even horses, which needed to be quickly unloaded in the provinces to reinforce Roman military presence. In addition, the Roman navy played a crucial role in transporting tributes and resources from the provinces to Rome. The wealth from conquests was regularly sent by sea, along well-monitored routes. In many cases, the navy ensured that the resources reached the capital safely, without external interference. Large naval transport operations were key to sustaining Rome's economy, maintaining a constant flow of wealth, food, and soldiers. However, the real secret behind the effectiveness of the Roman navy lay in the internal organization of each fleet. Each naval unit was commanded by a prefect, a high-ranking officer responsible for overseeing the fleet and ensuring its efficiency. Under the command of the prefect, the captains were directly responsible for each ship. Although the fleet was made up of various classes of ships, including the imposing warships and the faster patrol ships, all were equipped and prepared for different types of missions. The logistics of maintaining and repairing the vessels was a constant priority, and the Romans developed advanced techniques to extend the lifespan of their ships, even under harsh conditions. The Roman navy also benefited from the presence of specialists, such as naval engineers and highly skilled shipwrights, who were trained to perform quick and effective repairs during voyages. These repairs were vital, as Roman fleets frequently faced storms, enemy attacks, or even the wear and tear of constant use. The ability to repair or rebuild a ship in the middle of a campaign was a significant advantage over other powers of the time. The Romans, with their characteristic discipline and organization, left nothing to chance. The navies under Augustus, Messenian, and Ravenna were the largest and best organized of their time, supporting the campaigns of conquest and defense of Rome and ensuring the empire continued to prosper. Each mission, each battle, and even each commercial voyage were orchestrated with precision and efficiency that allowed ancient Rome not only to dominate the sea, but also to use it as an indispensable tool of power, influence, and prosperity. Rome's naval supremacy was not limited to its war fleets or the internal security of its borders. Under Augustus and his successors, the Roman navy also became a powerful diplomatic tool. Control of the Mediterranean waters not only guaranteed the empire's security, but also gave Rome great ability to exert political and economic influence over other powers of the time. Roman naval diplomacy became a reflection of Rome's absolute power and its ability to project force throughout the known world. One of the keys to this diplomacy was the use of strategic treaties and alliances. In a sea filled with conflicting interests and regional powers, such as the Hellenistic kingdoms in the east and the barbarian tribes along the coasts of North Africa and Europe, Rome needed to be skilled in negotiation and in demonstrating its military strength to secure its dominant position. A notable example of this diplomacy was how Rome interacted with the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt. After the annexation of Egypt, Rome not only secured a constant flow of resources and wealth, but also leveraged its strategic position in the Mediterranean to ensure trade and peace with other Eastern nations. Rome used its navy not only as an instrument of strength, but also as a symbol of power and prosperity. Roman ships were present on nearly every major trade route, from the coasts of Spain to the Levant, and any nation wishing to establish trade relations with Rome first had to ensure maritime security. This placed Rome in a unique position, as any attempt to challenge Roman control over the sea could result in devastating military reprisals. For instance, Roman dominance over the grain trade in Egypt meant that any disruption of trade routes to Rome was viewed as an act of hostility, which could trigger naval intervention. Furthermore, Rome used its navy to protect its interests and alliances in distant territories. One way this was achieved was by ensuring Roman presence in North Africa, particularly in the region of the Carthaginian Empire, which became a Roman province after the Punic Wars. Rome maintained a strong naval presence to ensure that potential enemies, such as the Germanic tribes or pirates from Cilicia, did not jeopardize the empire's stability. Roman navies also participated in protecting trade routes in the west, especially along the coast of Gaul, where Rome maintained strong diplomatic relations with local tribes, ensuring peace and stability. But Roman naval diplomacy wasn't limited to the use of force to maintain peace. Rome also practiced the use of gift ships as a way to consolidate its alliances. Often foreign powers, such as the kingdoms of Arabia or Asia Minor, would offer tribute or other resources to Rome, and in return, Rome would send prestigious ships and vessels as symbols of goodwill. These gifts not only reinforced Rome's image as a benevolent power, but also served as a means of ensuring that smaller nations remained subordinated and committed to Roman policies. Over time, the Roman navy became one of the empire's primary tools of soft power. The fact that Rome maintained vast dominion over the seas and trade routes helped foster loyalty and dependence among the provinces, while also projecting an image of stability and prosperity. Roman fleets were present in every major port of the empire and were constantly seen by foreign peoples, functioning as a constant reminder to the world of Roman superiority. The Romans also used the navy to ensure the protection of their distant provinces. The presence of a Roman fleet in the Aegean Sea, for example, not only secured trade routes, but also served as a clear demonstration of Rome's power over the Hellenistic nations still struggling to maintain their independence. Similarly, in the West, Rome used its navy to ensure that native tribes or invading enemies were kept away from Italy and other vital regions of the empire. In the end, Roman naval diplomacy not only ensured peace and stability within the empire, but also solidified Rome's position as the greatest military and economic power of the ancient world. The Roman navy was not just a fighting force. It was also a reflection of Rome's power, wealth, and sophistication, projecting its influence over the Mediterranean and beyond. To maintain its supremacy at sea, Rome had to rely on a diverse and skilled force of sailors capable of operating its enormous naval fleets throughout the empire. The Roman navy wasn't just made up of Roman citizens, but was a blend of cultures and skills that ensured the effectiveness and expansion of naval power. This diversity was one of the keys to the Roman navy's success, as Rome understood that combining different maritime expertise and experiences could create an invincible fleet. Contrary to what many might imagine, Roman sailors were not necessarily the most experienced at sea. This was because in the early days, Rome was more focused on land campaigns, and building an elite navy was a process that required time and adaptation. Initially, Rome began recruiting sailors from its coastal provinces and other areas with a long naval tradition. As a result, sailors from places like Sicily, southern Italy, Corsica, and Sardinia became key figures in the Roman fleet, bringing with them knowledge of navigation and ship handling that Rome itself had not fully mastered. But as Rome expanded its dominion, the need to further bolster its navy grew. To meet this demand, recruitment began to include foreign sailors, such as Greeks and Egyptians, who already possessed vast naval experience. The Greeks, for example, brought with them decades of naval history, with their powerful trireme fleets, and their expertise was vital in helping Rome develop and expand its own naval tactics. Similarly, the Egyptians, with their knowledge of the waters around Egypt and the African coast, became essential allies for Roman success in the eastern Mediterranean. In addition to foreign sailors, the Roman navy also recruited prisoners of war and slaves. This practice, although controversial, was a common and pragmatic one. Rome used these slaves as rowers, as the Roman galleys required a considerable workforce to operate the large oars that powered the ships. While many of these sailors were enslaved, the need for specialized labor ensured that the Roman fleet was well equipped to face the challenges of the sea. This diversity in the crew was not limited to recruiting sailors, but also extended to the command of the fleet. The commanders of Roman fleets were generally high-ranking Roman officers known as prefects, But in some cases, external figures with significant naval experience were also incorporated into leadership. These commanders were highly valued for their tactical experience and their ability to lead large, complex naval operations. Additionally, Rome encouraged intensive training and discipline among its sailors. The training wasn't just about learning how to maneuver the ships or use onboard weapons. It also involved a process of integration among sailors from different backgrounds and cultures. This union and adaptation among diverse groups was one of the great strengths of the Roman Navy, ensuring a cohesive and efficient force capable of operating under pressure and in varied environments. It's also important to highlight the crucial role of coastal cities and military ports, such as Ostia, which provided training, repairs, and ship maintenance. These locations not only offered the necessary infrastructure for fleet operations, but also served as recruitment centers and meeting points for sailors from all over the empire. Here, new recruits were taught how to maneuver ships, fight in combat, and understand the complex routines of life at sea. This diverse recruitment and intensive training allowed the Roman Navy to maintain an unbeatable naval presence throughout its campaigns and wars. The experience of sailors from different cultures was one of the pillars that sustained Rome's power at sea, as it united various techniques and tactics into a cohesive and efficient system. And thus, Rome continued to dominate the waters of the Mediterranean, maintaining its position as the greatest naval power in the ancient world. During the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, the Roman Empire was at the height of its power, and its navy played a crucial role in preserving and expanding that dominion. While the Roman legions dominated the land, the navy ensured that the Mediterranean waters, the African coasts, and the trade routes remained under Roman control, preventing any threats that might challenge the empire. This period, known as the High Empire, saw Rome achieve unparalleled stability and wealth, with the naval fleet being one of the main pillars supporting this grandeur. The Roman navy during this period not only protected the empire's coasts, but also acted as a projection of power. Roman emperors knew that ensuring naval supremacy meant not only preventing attacks from pirates and external enemies, but also securing their vast trade routes, which were essential for the flow of wealth, food, and other resources needed to sustain such a large empire. With the prosperity of the High Empire, the Roman government heavily invested in its fleet. During the reign of emperors like Trajan and Hadrian, the navy was modernized and expanded. Faster, stronger warships were designed, and new shipbuilding techniques were adopted to ensure that Rome was always one step ahead of its enemies at sea. Emperor Hadrian, for example, knew that maritime dominance was crucial not only for defense, but for controlling new lands and maintaining his empire. Rome's main fleets were based in 2 strategic regions, Misenum and Ravenna. The Misenum fleet was tasked with ensuring the security of the western Mediterranean, including the areas around Italy, while Ravenna was responsible for the Adriatic Sea. Together, these fleets formed the core of Roman naval defense and ensured the mobility of the legions, enabling Rome to respond quickly to any threats, whether from the sea or neighboring powers. Additionally, the Roman Empire developed an impressive network of naval bases and military ports throughout its territory, from the coast of Asia Minor to North Africa. These ports were not only repair and supply points, but also strategic locations for controlling the trade routes that connected the empire's farthest corners. The security of these ports was crucial, as any attack on these routes could weaken Rome and increase internal tensions. The rise of piracy, which began to grow during the final years of the Republic, also continued to be a challenge during the High Empire. However, the Roman navy was well equipped to handle this threat. Campaigns against pirates, particularly in the Aegean Sea and along the coasts of Asia Minor and Syria, became more organized and sophisticated. By fighting pirates, Rome not only protected its own interests but also ensured that trade routes remained open, allowing the circulation of essential goods for the imperial economy. Another key aspect of maintaining Roman naval power during the High Empire was the use of its navy to support military campaigns abroad. The Roman fleet was essential for Trajan's campaigns in Dacia and the eastern regions, enabling the movement of troops and resources, as well as ensuring superiority in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Roman fleets also acted as an effective means of power projection, intimidating neighboring states and preventing rival powers from daring to challenge Rome's supremacy. However, as strong as the Roman navy was, it was not immune to challenges. Maintaining a large and efficient fleet required constant resources, from training new sailors to supplying materials for shipbuilding. The Navy was also subject to economic pressures, as the costs of building and maintaining a robust fleet were high. Even so, Roman emperors understood that the Navy was a necessary investment to ensure the empire's longevity. Thus, during the High Empire, Rome solidified its position as the dominant naval power in the Mediterranean, ensuring the stability and security of the empire. The Roman Navy was not only a military force but also a symbol of imperial power, reflecting Rome's ability to adapt, expand, and maintain control over a vast empire that spanned continents and seas. The Roman Empire became a true maritime powerhouse, not only through military victories, but also by using the Navy to protect its commercial interests and guarantee continued prosperity. Naval battles were crucial in determining Rome's supremacy over the Mediterranean. During centuries of expansion and conquest, Rome faced various enemies that challenged its maritime dominance. Each major battle at sea not only involved innovative military tactics, but also reflected the Roman Navy's ability to adapt to changes in warfare strategies and the empire's needs. Among these battles, some stood out due to their magnitude and impact, becoming milestones in Roman military history. One of the most emblematic battles in the history of the Roman Navy was the Battle of Mylae, 260 BC, fought during the First Punic War. This confrontation was Rome's first major naval victory over Carthage, the largest naval power in the Mediterranean at the time. The Roman Navy, initially inexperienced in naval battles, was able to overcome the Carthaginian fleet by introducing a new tactic: the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed the Romans to turn a naval battle into a close combat, similar to land fighting. This ingenious device allowed the Romans to use their superiority in land combat and secured their victory. The victory at Mylae not only solidified the Roman Navy's confidence, but also established a strategy that would be successfully used in future battles. The Battle of the Aegates Islands, 241 BC, also during the First Punic War, marked the end of the long conflict between Rome and Carthage. After the victory at Mylae and a series of subsequent confrontations, Rome finally defeated Carthage at the Battle of the Aegates Islands, resulting in the destruction of much of the Carthaginian fleet. This victory ensured Roman naval supremacy in the Western Mediterranean and led to the signing of a peace treaty that ended the war, leaving Rome as the region's dominant naval power. Control over trade routes and the security of the empire became even firmer after this decisive victory. During the empire, the Roman Navy faced challenges on different fronts, including confrontations with pirates and rival powers. During Emperor Augustus' reign, one of the most significant battles was the Battle of Naulochus, 36 BC, where the Roman fleet defeated the fleet of Sextus Pompey, a pirate leader who had rebelled against Rome. This victory was important because it eliminated a significant threat to Roman control in the Western Mediterranean and further consolidated Roman supremacy in the waters. However, perhaps the most famous and decisive naval battle was the Battle of Actium, 31 BC, between the fleets of Octavian, future Emperor Augustus, and Mark Antony, who was supported by the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. This battle marked the end of the years-long civil war in Rome and established Octavian as the empire's sole ruler. The Roman Navy, commanded by Agrippa, one of Rome's most skilled generals, decisively defeated Mark Antony's fleet, and after the defeat, he fled to Egypt, where he and Cleopatra committed suicide. The victory at Actium secured the establishment of the Roman Empire under Octavian, and Roman naval supremacy in the Mediterranean was solidified, as no rival power would challenge the empire's dominance at sea for many years. These naval battles, although just a part of Rome's military campaigns, had a profound impact on the empire's fate. They demonstrated the skill and innovation of the Roman Navy, which knew how to learn from its mistakes, adapt to new circumstances, and above all, turn naval warfare into an extension of land warfare. With victories over their naval enemies, Rome not only secured control over vast territories, but also became a naval superpower whose fleets would dominate the Mediterranean for centuries. In addition to their victories on the battlefield, these naval battles also had a profound political impact, as many of them determined the rise or fall of emperors and generals. The Roman Navy, with its tactics and ability to maintain control over its waters, was one of the greatest factors of stability for the empire, symbolizing its power and its capacity for adaptation and innovation in the military field. These victories in Rome's major naval battles not only secured the empire's safety, but also perpetuated the idea that Roman power was unrivaled, both on land and at sea. Rome's naval superiority, built on ingenuity, strategy, and willpower, became one of the defining marks of the empire's greatness, and these battles continue to be remembered as pivotal moments in the history of the ancient world. Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean, which had been established through great effort, began to be challenged in the 5th century AD. The empire, weakened by decades of political instability and barbarian invasions, saw the resurgence of powerful naval enemies, with the Vandals standing out as a growing threat. After crossing the Rhine in 406 AD, the Vandals began ravaging the Western Roman Empire and eventually established a prosperous kingdom in North Africa. The Vandals established their power base in the city of Carthage, which they had conquered in 439 AD, taking advantage of the collapse of Roman power in the region. Carthage, once an important commercial and naval hub during the Punic Wars, became the capital of the Vandal Empire. The Vandal fleet soon rivaled the Roman navy, and Vandal pirates began attacking Roman merchant ships and disrupting the empire's trade routes, causing significant damage. The threat of a new naval power in the Mediterranean was a severe blow to Rome, which was already facing numerous challenges on land. With the rise of the Vandals at sea, Rome's ability to protect its coasts and trade routes diminished considerably. In 455 AD, the Vandals sacked Rome, one of the greatest humiliations suffered by the empire. Under the leadership of King Genseric, the Vandal fleet invaded the city, looting its treasures and plundering its riches. The event marked one of the most dramatic episodes of the decline of the Western Roman Empire, highlighting the vulnerability of the Roman navy in the face of the new naval powers emerging on the horizon. The rise of the Vandals, along with other barbarian threats like the Ostrogoths and Visigoths, demonstrated Rome's increasing vulnerability. Although the empire still maintained a sizable navy, the Vandal attacks were a clear reflection of how Roman naval supremacy was disintegrating as the empire succumbed to internal and external pressures. The weakening of the Roman navy in the face of the Vandals marked the beginning of the end for Roman naval presence in the Mediterranean. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD is often seen as the end of an era and the beginning of a new period in European history. Throughout the 5th century, the empire was surrounded by barbarian invaders who destabilized its borders and weakened its political and military structure. The Vandal sack of Rome in 455 AD was just one of many signs that the empire's resistance was waning. During this period, the Roman navy was also severely affected by a growing lack of resources and the loss of strategic territories, rendering it incapable of facing new naval threats. The last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chief Odoacer in 476 AD, marking the official end of the Western Roman Empire. This fall did not immediately mean the collapse of Roman institutions, but it represented the fragmentation of power in a Europe divided between various barbarian kingdoms. The loss of political and military cohesion led to the disintegration of the Roman navy, which, without the centralized support of the empire, could no longer maintain control over the Mediterranean waters. The decline of the Roman navy was a reflection of Rome's inability to adapt to changing times. The fleet that had once been a formidable force, capable of dominating the Mediterranean and protecting trade routes, was now just a shadow of its former self. As enemies like the Vandals continued to challenge its supremacy at sea, the empire became increasingly vulnerable to attacks. The lack of investment and the reduction of Roman naval fleets accelerated the loss of control over the sea, and the navy, once a pillar of the empire, was gradually sidelined. With the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Rome's presence in the Mediterranean was effectively ended, and the Roman navy as a unified force disappeared. From this point on, naval power in the Mediterranean was contested by new powers, such as the Byzantine and Islamic empires, and Rome lost its dominant position. The collapse of the empire also marked the end of an era of naval innovations and military strategies that had allowed Rome to rule the seas for centuries. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Roman navy did not disappear entirely, as it survived in the Byzantine Empire, which continued to inherit many of Rome's traditions. The Byzantine navy, with its strong base in Constantinople, became the primary naval power in the eastern Mediterranean. Although the empire was in decline, the Byzantine navy was one of the last representations of Rome's naval legacy and withstood attacks from Muslim, Slavic, and Turkish invaders for many centuries. At the height of the Byzantine Empire, the navy stood out for its innovation and adaptation. The use of Greek fire, an incendiary substance that was extremely effective in naval battles, became one of the most feared weapons in the Mediterranean. This military secret allowed the Byzantines to protect their coasts and their capital, Constantinople, from external attacks. The Byzantine navy also engaged in various confrontations with maritime powers, including the Arabs, and continued to exert a significant influence on trade and the security of maritime routes in the region. However, as the Byzantine Empire lost territory and power over the centuries, its ability to maintain an effective navy also deteriorated. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 to the Ottomans marked the end of the last Roman naval resistance. Although the Byzantine navy had resisted for a long time, the Ottoman forces, with a powerful and well-organized navy, eventually succeeded in taking control of the eastern Mediterranean, ending Roman presence at sea. Despite the fall of the Byzantine Empire, the Roman naval legacy, represented by the Byzantine navy, continued to influence the naval tactics of later powers, including the Ottomans. The history of the Roman navy, from its rise during the Punic Wars to its final resistance under the Byzantines, remains a testament to the strategic importance of the sea for imperial power and the military innovations that marked naval history. Despite the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the subsequent disintegration of its navy, the Roman naval legacy did not completely vanish. The naval innovations and tactics developed by Rome continued to influence the medieval powers that arose after the empire's collapse. The Roman shipbuilding system, its combat strategies, and the structure of its fleets were studied and, in many cases, adapted by the new kingdoms and empires that emerged in Europe and the Mediterranean. During the medieval period, the Byzantine Empire, the direct successor of the Roman Empire in the East, played a key role in preserving and expanding the Roman naval legacy. The Byzantine navy, based in Constantinople, continued to use many Roman tactics and techniques, including the famous Greek fire, an incendiary substance that had a devastating impact on naval battles. Additionally, the Byzantines maintained a highly efficient shipbuilding system, which allowed the construction of fast and powerful ships. These ships were essential for defending the empire's borders and protecting Mediterranean trade routes. However, as the Byzantine Empire declined and Muslim powers began to rise in the Mediterranean, other cultures started to adopt and modify Roman naval tactics. The Islamic Empire, especially during the Abbasid dynasty, also invested in building a powerful navy, and their warships were often inspired by Roman and Byzantine models. Moreover, the Italian maritime republics, such as Venice, Genoa, and Pisa, began to stand out during the Middle Ages, largely due to their adaptation of Roman naval strategies. These medieval powers not only preserved the Roman naval tradition, but also expanded and refined it. The Republic of Venice, in particular, became one of the main naval centers of the Middle Ages, building a fleet that rivaled the ancient Roman navies. Furthermore, the Roman tradition of using large fleets of ships to protect trade routes and maintain the empire's security was assimilated by many of these powers, who in turn used these strategies to expand their own empires and establish trade networks in the Mediterranean. Thus, while the Roman Empire in its original form disappeared, Rome's naval legacy endured for centuries, being adapted and improved by various medieval empires and nations. The lasting impact of the Roman navy on naval tactics and shipbuilding can be seen in the history of the maritime powers that dominated the medieval Mediterranean, and more broadly, in naval traditions that still influence modern naval forces today. And so, the grand history of the Roman navy shows us how innovation, adaptation, and strategic vision were crucial for the empire to dominate the seas and expand its boundaries. Rome's naval legacy, though spanning centuries, still impacts the modern world in ways we may not always imagine. If you enjoyed this dive into history and want to learn more about the feats that shaped our past, don't forget to leave your comment below. What aspects of the Roman navy did you find most fascinating? Like the video if you learned something new, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next amazing content. See you next time.